All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to talk about a massive shift in thinking, how to stop living year to year and start truly architecting your entire decade. We're going to deconstruct a fundamental bug in our mental operating system, one that keeps us stuck in these frustrating short-term cycles. And it all starts with a question I'm pretty sure you've asked yourself before. Seriously, have you ever felt this? You look back on 10 years of just grinding, of being busy all the time, only to realize you're kind of in the same place. It's an incredibly frustrating feeling, right? Well, it turns out it's not entirely your fault. There's actually a biological reason for this. And that reason has a name: temporal myopia. I want you to think of it like a glitch in your neural OS, your brain zone operating system. It's this built-in biological inability to really, truly grasp the insane power of long-term compounding. So this isn't a character flaw. It's not about being lazy. It's literally a bug in our wiring that we have to learn to consciously override. So let's diagnose this bug, shall we? To fix the problem, we first have to get under the hood and understand exactly how our brain gets the future so wrong. This slide right here, it reveals the fundamental mismatch. Our brain lives in a state of what the source calls short-term overheating. We get super ambitious, we wildly overestimate what we can cram into a single year, and it just leads to burnout and disappointment. But the reality is, we live in a long-cycle universe where we just catastrophically, and I mean catastrophically, underestimate what's possible over 10 years of focused compounding effort. Let's just zoom in on the first year of any big project. Systems thinking calls this the bootstrap phase. So you're putting in this massive effort, right? You're hitting constant friction. And by month 8, you're looking around and seeing almost zero visible return on your investment. So by the end of the year, your brain does the math and concludes, well, this isn't working. And this quote just nails the critical error. Our neural OS is an addict for immediate feedback. When it doesn't get that quick win, it interprets all that friction from the bootstrap phase as total failure. And that triggers what's called a systemic reset. We quit, we pivot, we start something new, often at the exact moment that compounding curve was about to go vertical. You see how this leads us directly into the short cycle trap? This is that flawed system that keeps us repeating that cycle of starting and stopping over and over again. And it's exactly why traditional goals, like New Year's resolutions, are practically designed to fail from the get-go. And if you get stuck in this trap, you become what the source calls a linear drifter. I mean, what a powerful image, right? Someone who starts 1,000 little fires, but never concentrates their energy long enough to build a sun. It's not that you're unsuccessful. You're just running a short cycle program in a universe that only rewards long cycle thinking. And the costs of this linear short-term planning, they're devastating. You get strategic stagnation, you're busy perfecting a strategy for the person you were 3 years ago. You suffer from directional entropy. Think of all those good opportunities that seem productive but actually pull you way off course. This leads to systemic fragmentation, having the skills but no platform, or the money but no freedom. Ultimately, your entire decade is at risk of becoming a random walk, where all that hard work just cancels itself out. And this brings us to the most crucial point. Without a blueprint, you are simply under-architected. You're meticulously laying individual bricks. You're working incredibly hard, but you have no idea if you're building a little shed or a grand cathedral, because you've never even looked at the master plan. Okay, so enough about the problem. It's a big one. How do we actually fix it? Well, it requires a complete paradigm shift. It's time to stop being just a bricklayer and start being the architect of your own life. Here is the core shift in mindset. The old way is all about urgency-based reactivity. You're constantly planning your week, you're reacting to emails, putting out fires. The new way? That's vision-based architecture. You stop planning your week and you start architecting your decade. You're no longer just reacting to what comes at you. You are actively designing the entire probability field of your own success. Now, the number one tool for this new approach is something called backcasting. It's the opposite of forecasting. Instead of starting from today with all its limitations, you project yourself 10 years into the future. You define that end state with crystal clear, high-resolution detail, and then you work backward through time to map out the non-negotiable steps to get there. And this is the ultimate power move. You stop trying to be a psychic, You stop trying to predict the future. Instead, you use systems thinking to create the conditions and the feedback loops that make your desired outcome a systemic inevitability. You are literally designing the probability field in your favor. So this all sounds great in theory, but how do you actually do this? Well, the source material lays out a super clear, actionable framework. It's called the Master Plan Protocol, and it's basically a 3-step engine for your next 3,650 days. So the protocol really breaks down into 3 distinct phases. First, backcasting synthesis. Then you apply what's called a decadal milestone filter. And finally, you execute on systemic resource allocation. Let's just touch on what each of those means. So, step 1, backcasting synthesis. This is the vision phase, the fun part. You mentally travel 10 years forward and you describe your systemic ideal with as much detail as you can possibly imagine. What does your health look like, feel like? Your wealth, your relationships? What have you built that is truly yours, your empire? Second, and this is so critical, you apply the decadal milestone filter. So you're working backward from that 10-year vision and you identify the 3, and only 3, most critical keystone moves. Now, these are not small tasks. These are massive systemic upgrades that, once you achieve them, act as these incredible force multipliers, making everything else on your list either way easier or completely irrelevant. And finally, step 3, systemic resource allocation. This is where the rubber meets the road. You have to audit your life as it is today. Look at your 24-hour cycle. Is 80% of your time, your energy, your focus, is your mental bandwidth being allocated to those keystone moves that serve a year 5 or a year 10 goal? If not, you're leaking bandwidth on things that do not matter for the decade-long architecture. So when you put this all together, the outcome is a total transformation. You go from being a drifter to a state of absolute dominance over your own life. And if there's one thing I want you to burn into your brain, it's this. We are absolutely obsessed with speed, with hustle culture, with just being busy. But what this protocol teaches us is that speed is completely and utterly useless if your direction, your vector, is wrong. It's so much better to move slowly and deliberately in the right direction than to sprint at full speed toward the wrong destination. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to really reflect on. Look at your daily actions, your weekly plans, your goals for this year, and ask yourself, honestly, are you just busy laying bricks at random, or are you consciously, deliberately, and patiently building your cathedral? All right, let's talk about something that goes way beyond simple goal setting. We're not just planning a week or a year here. We're talking about architecting an entire decade of your life. We're going to explore the blueprint for making the next 10 years really, truly count. But first, let's start with a question that might hit a little too close to home. Have you ever felt this? You put in all the work, you stay busy, you make what feel like smart moves, but then you look back over 10 years and the net progress just feels flat. Why does that happen? Well, it turns out there's a fundamental bug in our mental operating system. And that bug has a name: temporal myopia. It's basically our brain's built-in inability to really truly grasp the insane power of long-term compounding. We are biologically hardwired for instant gratification, for immediate feedback, which means we just naturally undervalue those distant rewards, no matter how huge they could be. And this myopia leads us right into a classic trap. We get all fired up and we wildly overestimate what we can cram into 1 year. This leads to what you could call short-term overheating. But at the same time, we catastrophically underestimate what we can build, what we can architect over 10 years. We push so hard that we burn out, often right at the exact moment that slow, powerful engine of compounding was about to roar to life. So this brings us right to the core of the problem, the default operating system that most of us are running on when we think about the future. I mean, just look at the difference here. It is night and day. On the left, you've got linear planning. It's the simple, cozy idea that tomorrow is just today plus, 10%. But reality, over there on the right, is not a straight line. It is a complex, chaotic system full of exponential curves and sudden shocks, those black swan events. So assuming you can just walk a straight path in a world that's constantly changing, that is a fundamental critical error. And the results of running on this flawed model, they're painfully predictable. First, you get strategic stagnation. You get trapped in what's called a local optimum, What that means is you're making all the best moves you can, but only within your current limited reality. You're completely blind to a much bigger opportunity that's just over the horizon. You end up perfectly optimizing a life for a person you won't even be in 3 years. So, how do you know if you're stuck in this linear trap? Well, let's dive into the symptoms, the telltale signs that you're operating without a real blueprint for your life. This quote absolutely nails it. It reframes that constant feeling of being busy. It's suggesting that the problem isn't that you're bad at managing your time. The problem is structural. You've got way too much information, too many opportunities, too many inputs coming at you, and you have no master plan to filter them through. You are over-inputted and you are under-architected. Think about it like this. Imagine you've got all the best materials, right? You've got the skills, you've got an incredible work ethic. You're trying to build something magnificent, a true cathedral.
But you're doing it one single brick at a time without ever once looking at the blueprint. You're just placing bricks wherever they seem to fit in that moment. The effort is massive, but the structure itself, it's going nowhere.
This chaos leads to a state called directional entropy. This is when every single opportunity that lands on your desk seems like a good move. A new project, a different job, a cool investment. In isolation, they all make perfect sense. But because they aren't aligned with a single central vision, they just pull you in a dozen different directions at once. And here is the final brutal math of it all. After a decade of these random walk events, of chasing all these shiny, unaligned opportunities, what happens? All your efforts cancel each other out. You've essentially run a marathon just to end up right back where you started. 10 years of hard work for 0 years of net progress. Okay, so that's the problem. It's a big one. So how do we fix this? How do we escape the trap? We have to shift our entire perspective. We have to move up to the meta layer and embrace something called backcasting. Instead of trying to plan forward from the chaos of today, backcasting completely flips the script. You start by defining your ideal end state with absolute crystal clarity, and then you architect the entire path backward from that point in time. So here's how it actually works. You start at year 10. You define in vivid, high-resolution detail what your ideal life or business looks like. Then you ask yourself, okay, to be there in year 10, where did I need to be in year 5? What was that one single keystone move that unlocked everything? And then, to hit that 5-year milestone, what is the crucial bootstrap phase I need to kick off right now, in year 1? See? This changes everything. You stop trying to predict a chaotic, unknowable future, and you start actively designing a probability field around the outcome you want. By working backward, every single action you take today is now perfectly aligned with the result 10 years from now. This creates what the source material calls temporal alignment. So let's get practical. How do we turn this really powerful concept into a framework you can actually use? Well, let's look at the master plan protocol. It all breaks down into 3 clear, actionable steps. First is the backcasting synthesis we just talked about, defining year 10 and working your way back. Second, you apply a decadal milestone filter to figure out the handful of crucial moves that really matter. And third, and this is huge, is systemic resource allocation. This is what that allocation can look like when you don't have a plan. You might do a personal audit and find that half of your mental energy, your bandwidth, is just leaking away into things that have zero connection to your long-term vision. Only a tiny fraction is actually building toward your 5- and 10-year goals. And here's the benchmark you should aim for. If 80% of your daily energy is not directly feeding one of your major long-term milestones, you are fundamentally misaligned. You are leaking the single most valuable resource you have. And this, right here, is the ultimate payoff. When you have this decadal map, you stop just hustling and hoping for the best. You stop trying so hard. Instead, you strategically position yourself, you build the right systems, you align your actions so that your success isn't just possible, it becomes a systemic inevitability. So the final question I'll leave you with is this. Are you ready to stop starting 1,000 small, disconnected fires that just burn out? Or are you ready to focus all that energy to architect a real plan and to start building a sun, a central, powerful system that illuminates everything else you do?
All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're not talking about your typical goal setting. Forget that. We are going way deeper. We're talking about a protocol for long-term achievement, for literally architecting your entire next decade. This is the Master Plan Protocol.
So it all kicks off with this really fundamental question, one that probably hits close to home for a lot of you. Why is it that we seem to overestimate what we can do in 1 year, but then just catastrophically, wildly underestimate what we can build, what we can create over 10?
Well, there's a name for this. The source material calls it temporal myopia. You can think of it like a debilitating bug in your neural OS, your mental operating system. It's this biological glitch that literally makes it almost impossible for us to accurately see and value the insane power of long-term compounding.
And this bug, this temporal myopia, it leads us straight into a trap. We're going to call it the short cycle trap. And this is where we're going to break down exactly why our standard approach, setting annual goals, is just fundamentally broken for building anything that truly matters.
This is where it gets really clear. On the left, you've got your standard New Year's resolutions. That's a short cycle program, right? The second you hit any real friction, and you will hit friction, your brain just screams failure because the reward is too far away to feel real. So what happens? You quit. But on the right, that's decadal architecture. Now you're operating in a long cycle universe. That same friction isn't failure anymore. No, it's just the bootstrap phase. It's expected. It's part of the plan. And instead of a total system reset every year, you get this beautiful, powerful engine of iterative compounding. And here is the core mismatch, the whole problem in one sentence. You are running a short cycle program in a long cycle universe. It's like trying to run smartphone software on a supercomputer. The systems are fundamentally incompatible, and that's why so many ambitious plans just fizzle out.
So if that's the mismatch, what's the actual cost? What's the real price we pay for operating this way? Well, that takes us to the cost of drifting, the very steep price of unstructured effort. You see, when you're drifting, a few really nasty systemic failures start to kick in. First, there's linear planning, the silly assumption that the future is just a slightly better version of today. This leads to strategic stagnation, which is crazy when you think about it. You're busy optimizing for a version of yourself that won't even exist in 5 years. Then comes directional entropy, where every good move you make actually pulls you in a different direction, further and further from your true north. And the end result of all this? Systemic fragmentation. You end up with amazing skills but no platform to use them, or maybe you have the wealth but none of the freedom you thought it would buy.
You know that feeling of being constantly overwhelmingly busy, just running on a hamster wheel? Well, this quote absolutely nails it. You aren't busy, you are simply over-inputted and under-architected. It's not about your effort, it's a structural problem. You've got too much noise coming in and not enough blueprint telling you where to go. Without a master plan, a decade of your life just turns into a series of, random walk events. You know how it is. You start a project, you pivot to a new opportunity, you learn a new skill, you chase a new trend, and in the moment, every one of those steps feels productive. It feels like you're moving forward. But after 10 years of that frantic, unstructured activity, when you finally stop and look back at what you've actually built, what's the net result? What's the consolidated progress? A big fat 0. Yep, 10 years of hard work, but 0 years of real directional progress, because all those random walks just ended up canceling each other out.
Okay, so that's the problem. It's a pretty stark picture. So how do we fix it? How do we escape the trap? Well, let's pivot to the solution. It's time to talk about architecting your decade. And this requires a completely different way of thinking, an unordinary mindset.
This right here, this is the absolute game changer. The core mental shift is this. You have to stop forecasting forward from where you are today. Instead, you start backcasting from your desired end state. You don't predict the future. You design it backward from a high-resolution vision. And just look at the difference here. Predicting the future, that's just passive hope, isn't it? You're just reacting to whatever chance throws your way. But on the other side, you're designing the probability field. This is active architecture. You are systemically positioning yourself to create a refactored timeline where your success becomes the most probable outcome. So what's the engine that powers this whole architecture? It's a principle called iterative compounding. To make it work, you have to align your neural OS. You have to be running what the source calls playlist 5 in your mind. This is what ensures that every single action you take today is a load-bearing pillar for a result 5 or even 10 years from now. This is how you create temporal alignment, where your present is always building your designed future. Which brings us to a vital truth. Speed is irrelevant if the vector is incorrect. It does not matter how fast you are moving if you are going in the wrong direction. The decadal map locks in your vector. And that clarity,
That certainty of direction is what provides the unshakable calm that you need for elite-level focus.
So, the ultimate goal is this. You stop trying to succeed. You get off that hamster wheel of pure effort. Instead, you position yourself. You architect a system where success becomes a systemic inevitability. This is high-performance psychology at scale. You're designing a system where your desired outcome is the natural, logical conclusion of how it's built to run.
Okay, so we've got the mindset. We understand the philosophy. Now, how do we make it real? That's where the master plan protocol comes in. Think of this as your practical pattern weaver tool, your mapping engine for the next 3,650 days of your life.
And it breaks down into 3 core steps. First, backcasting synthesis. You define your 10-year systemic ideal in stunningly high resolution, and then you work all the way back to what you need to do today. Second, the Decadal milestone filter. You get ruthless and identify the 3, maybe 4, keystone moves that make everything else either easier or totally irrelevant. And third, systemic resource allocation. You ensure that 80% of your daily energy is feeding those long-term milestones. No more leaks.
All of this really just boils down to one powerful command, a complete shift in how you see time. Stop thinking in quarters, start thinking in eras. This is the level where your logic, your wealth, and your empire finally merge into a single unbreakable trajectory.
Which brings us to the final question, the one you have to answer for yourself. After everything we've talked about, which one are you going to be? Are you a linear drifter, caught in a decade of random walks? Are you ready to become a decadal architect and deliberately design your future? The choice is yours.
All right, let's get right into it. We're all told to plan our day, plan our week, maybe even plan our year. But what if I told you that entire timescale is just wrong? Today, we are going to tear down that short-term thinking. We're going to explore a protocol for architecting your entire decade.
So, let me ask you this, and this is the central question for everything we're about to cover. Are you running a short-cycle program in a long-cycle universe? I mean, really think about it. Are your daily actions, your goals, all designed for that quick feedback, that immediate result? When the reality is, the universe we all operate in, it rewards the long game. It rewards compounding effort over years. And that mismatch, that could be the single biggest thing holding you back.
So to really understand why this mismatch even happens, we've got to look under the hood at the mechanics of the problem. We're calling it the short cycle trap. And the best way to think about it is like a hidden bug in your own operating system. You know, the way your brain is wired. And this bug, it actually has a name, temporal myopia. Now, it sounds complex, but it's actually pretty simple. It's our brain's built-in inability to feel the true massive power of long-term compounding. We are hardwired for immediate feedback, right? Which means we systematically, automatically undervalue actions where the real payoff is 5 or even 10 years down the road. And this is so important. It's not a character flaw. It's a feature of our biology.
And here's how this bug actually shows up in the real world. It creates this really strange paradox in how we plan our lives. You know the feeling, it's January, you're all fired up, and you massively overestimate what you can get done in 1 year. And what happens? Burnout by March. But at the exact same time, we catastrophically, it's almost laughable, underestimate what is possible in 10 years of consistent, focused work.
So, the crucial point here is this. If you've ever felt stuck or unsuccessful, this idea should completely reframe that whole narrative. The problem isn't you. The problem is you're using the wrong software. It's like you're trying to win a marathon by only training for a series of 100-meter dashes. It's a systemic mismatch. It's not a personal failure. Now, this mismatch, it's not harmless. It has a real cost. It leads to this state that we call drifting, and it's the direct result of a really flawed way of planning that, let's be honest, most of us were taught from day one.
And this flawed approach is called linear planning. It's basically the lazy assumption that tomorrow is just going to be today plus a little bit more. It completely ignores exponential curves, surprise events, and the crucial fact that you yourself are going to change. It's like trying to navigate a winding mountain road while only looking at a perfectly straight line on a map. You're just going to drive off a cliff.
And the result of living this way, this linear reactive approach, is something called directional entropy. And I bet you felt this. You feel incredibly busy, right? Opportunities are coming at you from all sides, you're saying yes to everything, but because there's no overarching plan, no North Star, every single yes just pulls you in a slightly different direction. Your energy gets scattered until you feel like you've moved everywhere, but you've gone nowhere.
This creates this deep fragmentation across your entire life. Just think about these outcomes for a second. You might have wealth, but you have zero freedom. You've got valuable skills, but no platform to actually leverage them. And the most brutal one of all, you look back after a decade of hard work, of grinding, and you realize you haven't made any meaningful directional progress.
This cathedral metaphor just illustrates the whole problem so perfectly. It's the absolute futility of effort without vision. You can be the hardest working bricklayer in the entire world, but without the architectural blueprint, you're not building a cathedral. You're just making a pile of bricks.
Okay, so that's the problem, and it's deep, it's systemic. But enough about the problem. Let's pivot to the solution. This is going to require a fundamental shift in your mindset, moving from a state of constant reaction to one of deliberate architecture. So on the left, you've got the old world of temporal myopia. That's urgency-based reactivity. Just planning your week, putting out fires. But on the right, that's the new paradigm, vision-based architecture. That's architecting your decade. It's not even playing the same game.
So, the main tool we're going to use to make this shift is called backcasting. It's so simple, but it is incredibly powerful. Instead of starting from today and trying to guess your way into the future, you start by defining your 10-year destination in high-resolution detail. And then you work backward through time to map out the exact path to get there.
And what you're doing with backcasting, it isn't fortune-telling. You're not trying to predict the future. What you're doing is designing a probability field. You're positioning yourself and building systems so that your desired outcome becomes a systemic inevitability, not some lucky break. You are literally stacking the deck in your own favor.
So how do we actually do this? Let's get into the tactical execution. This is the Master Plan Protocol, a 3-step engine for turning that 10-year vision into your reality. So here are the 3 steps. First, backcasting synthesis. That's where we create that high-definition vision. Second, we run that vision through the Decadal milestone filter to find the really big, game-changing moves. And finally, systemic resource allocation, which is all about making sure your daily actions actually line up with that grand plan.
Okay, let's break down step 1, backcasting synthesis. This is a thought experiment. I want you to project yourself 10 years from now and describe your ideal state with extreme clarity. What does your health look like? Your wealth, your freedom, what the source material calls your sovereign empire, meaning your ability to control your own time and choices. Then you ask the crucial question, to be there in year 10, what had to have been true in year 9? What about year 7, year 5? You trace that path all the way back to today.
Step 2 is where you apply the filter. From that whole map you just traced backward, you identify just 2 or 3 keystone moves. Now, this is a critical point. These are not items on a to-do list. They are systemic upgrades. Think of it like learning a high-value skill or building a specific business asset. These are foundational changes that make 1,000 other tasks either way easier or just completely irrelevant.
And finally, step 3, systemic resource allocation. This is the daily gut check. This is where the rubber meets the road. You look at your time, your focus, your energy, and if 80% of it is not directly feeding one of those keystone moves, one of those year 5 or year 10 milestones, then you are leaking bandwidth. You're drifting, not architecting.
Look, this isn't just another productivity hack. This is a complete operating system upgrade that allows you to shift from being a passenger in your own life to being the architect of your future.
This quote right here really says it all. The corporate world has us all thinking in quarterly reports. But for life of real meaning and impact, you've got to zoom out. You need to start thinking in eras, with you as the architect of each one.
Now, this is a big shift, I get it, but it starts with a single step. If you're ready to stop drifting and start architecting your own era, we've actually put together a 10-year strategic blueprint to help you get started. All you have to do is comment with the word decade below, and we'll send it right over to you. And I'll just leave you with this final question. Moving forward from this moment, which one are you going to be? A drifter, moved by the currents of the day-to-day? Or an architect, deliberately building the future you envision? The choice is yours.